We are good to go.
We're good to go, recording and everything?
Yes.
Great. I'll call the work session to order, and will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Hagenow.
Present.
Councilmember Kerr.
Here, remotely.
Councilmember Martin.
Present.
Councilmember Parmet.
Aaron wanted me to let the group know he was on the search and rescue mission.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Here.
Councilmember Thisted. Present. Mayor Riley.
Here.
There are 6 members present.
Thank you. Our first item is public comment period. If anyone from the public would like to speak, I'd ask you to please come forward to the podium and the microphone. And if anyone online would like to speak, please raise your hand. Anyone indicated they'd like to speak?
No.
In that case, I'll close the public comment period. At this point, turn it over to the town manager for the presentation from the SE Group and the comprehensive plan.
And I will turn this right over to our Community Development Director, Lindsay Hirsch.
Yes, basically, it's that time to do a check-in with council. Basically, we want to tell you where we've been, where we are, and where we're going with regards to the comp plan and the progress we've made. So, with that being said, Dylan, please introduce yourself and give the background for town council.
Sounds good. Hey, everybody. I think I know everyone pretty well by now at this point. But quick question, do you need me to share my screen, or do you have a version of the presentation up in the room? I can't tell.
Either one.
I'm happy to share my screen, so go ahead and do that. Alrighty, let's see. Are you seeing PowerPoint?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks for having me here. It's great to be with you virtually. Sorry I couldn't make it in person. It's been a lot of travel. So until next time. In any case, just wanted to basically touch base with you all on kind of how things are going, what we've been up to, and a little bit of a look ahead at kind of what's next. So some of the milestones that we've completed to date, as we've provided the town staff some existing conditions analysis and reporting, which I believe has been shared with you all, or at least the links to the virtual versions of those documents. We've completed some site visits, and we've had focus group meetings with stakeholders, and many of those folks were involved in the RTAP process. We've done some public engagement, which we'll talk a little bit more about. We've drafted the 3-mile plan, which we can talk a little bit more about in this presentation, but is looking basically at annexation possibilities and growing your town boundaries. And that's a pretty standard portion of the comprehensive plan. And we've worked on that with your Planning and Zoning Commission. And we've been working with Economic Planning Systems, which is the sub-consultant on our consultant team, to develop the housing needs assessment. We're about 80% complete. We'll cover some slides with some key takeaways from that report. And then in August, in the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, we'll be covering a draft of the housing needs assessment with them and seeking some feedback from them on the draft housing needs assessment. So without any further ado, so some of the previous engagement we've done up till now is we've had the stakeholder conversations and site visits. That was back in February. It feels like quite a long time ago, but only a few months. We were involved in the RTAP engagement process, which was really awesome to be involved in that. And awesome also now that you all are able to bring on a member of the RTAP, Jess, onto your staff, which is really great to see that come full circle. We had our first open house. We had 2 sort of versions of the open house back in May. We held one at the town office, the room you're in currently. And then we had one at the West Hills sort of community area, which is an outside pavilion. Unfortunately, when we had planned that engagement, the weather looked amazing. And then, of course, day of, it rained a little bit. So we didn't get quite the turnout, but we got plenty of people that walked by and participated in real time, which was really pretty fabulous. And then we had our second round of the open house, which was actually just a couple of weeks ago. And Mayor Riley, it was great to see you there for a little bit. Pretty well attended. It was very funny. Every time we've done any sort of engagement in Keystone, everybody has shown up at least 10 minutes early, which you'd think I'd get more used to by now, but it's still really surprising. And I got to say, I love it. And we had some pretty good turnout. This photo here is just an example of some of the one of the boards when we had people providing some of their comments on. They were voting with sticky dots, writing in a lot of comments, talking to several people. And we've had an online survey that was up since late May. And as of now is about 263 responses. As some of you know, it was a little slow to get started. We had sort of an initial jump in the first couple of weeks of it being open. And we were able to kind of expand some of our in-person engagement with the survey, kind of putting up QR codes in more physical locations around town. We had several of you and several members of the Planning Commission and several staff members also be pushing out through your social networks, through social media, through your newsletters, and just generally pumping out to the HOAs in town. And I think that continued push of just kind of putting this survey on people's radar has really been working, which is great. Our goal sort of from the get-go was to have the survey open for a while. We don't intend to close it until at the end of September. So we're continue to push it out in your networks. If you're having conversation with somebody the next time you're at the coffee shop and you've asked them if they've not taken the survey, please encourage them to do so. But right now at this point, we're getting quite a lot of responses, which is great. And then so we anticipate at the end of September that we'll close, once we've closed down the survey, we'll be able to get a summary report over for all of you to be able to take a look at and kind of get an idea of what people are saying. But we also have some upcoming engagement, so we're not quite done. We are planning to be holding a booth at the upcoming Bluegrass and Beers event at River Run Village, and that'll be on August 2nd and 3rd. So we'll be there both days of the Bluegrass and Beers event from 12:30 to 5. We've been doing some coordination in the background with Keystone Neighborhood Company about our activation plan and just kind of getting all of our ducks in a row there. But they've been really easy to work with, and we're excited for that. I think it should be a really good time. I'll be there, and I know Lindsay will be there, and so it'll be really fun. And then we're also planning on hosting yet another open house format, sort of to be determined, but mostly what we want to do and sometime in early September is we're going to start drafting some initial recommendations based on everything we've heard to date and basically our understanding of everything that we've gathered in terms of all the information from the housing needs assessment, from our existing conditions analysis reports that we started working on back in the spring. And so based on all that information, we'll start to see what are the commonalities, what are the through lines, what are some things that are kind of pointing us in the direction of some recommendations that we would want to make in the comprehensive plan. And so we'd want to bring some of those back and start getting some initial reactions from the public. Basically, if we want to start making recommendations, we want to make sure that they pass sort of the sniff test of the public first before we start actually putting them in a comprehensive plan, especially if we think anything is in any way controversial. I think the next slides are going to be about some of the takeaways we've initially heard, but I want to pause because I feel like I've just been talking at you for a minute. Is there any questions that anybody has at this point?
Hi, this is Dan Sullivan. Quick question. Well, two, I guess. How are people going to know you're at the Bluegrass and Beer? Will you have a booth? Will it have your name? Will it have Keystone or yours? How will you know that connect with you?
Sorry, I had a really tough time hearing that question.
Okay. How will they know how to connect with you? Will your booth be marked with Keystone or something else?
Yeah, we'll make sure to have town branding there. We'll also have some giveaways that with the town logo, and we'll um, basically have like some way of advertising the town with the town of Keystone logo on our tent. So we'll have like a sort of a tent with some materials, and we'll make sure that it's branded with the town of Keystone logo.
And the second question, a little harder probably, how do you convince us that we're getting a good representation of everybody versus just the squeaky wheel folks that will always attend these events? I'm just nervous about making sure we get a good representation.
Yeah, that is a really tough one. To be totally honest with you, in pretty much every community we work in, the version of this question comes up, and sort of the cop out answer that I can give you now is that, we can bring the horse to the water, right? We can hold a lot of engagement events, we can advertise them, we can show up where people are, and we can go knock on doors, we can do everything we can do, but the people that choose to participate will choose to participate, right? And so that's sort of like the cop out answer I can give you. I can tell you that we had a lot of conversations with town staff and just members of the RTAP steering committee and some locals that we're involved with to just ask them if we were to attend any festival, which one should we choose? And this was pretty much the one that most people agreed would be most heavily attended by locals. So we were somewhat careful in selecting which festival event we should go to. We thought it'd be like a good opportunity to have another presence that's sort of outside of the town council building. Back in May, part of our impetus for going to West Hills and not just to the town council, or to the town office rather, was sort of under the idea that we can try and meet people where they're at a little bit, by going to a place where there are a relatively high number of full-time residents. Um, and again, it's just one of those things where we're we're trying a multitude of different options. That's part of the reason we have the survey, and it's part of the reason we have it open for such a long period of time, is that we can hold an engagement window for a while and try a lot of different ideas and put it all out there and try and get as many responses as possible. But at the end of the day, the people that are going to choose to participate are the ones that choose to participate. I can tell you though that I'm working on a few projects right now, and right now, your community survey has by far the highest number of participants on it. So for what it's worth, it's doing really well.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Kind of piggyback on that question, are you distinguishing at the festival, having people self-report what they're interested in Keystone?
Yes.
Okay, and have you done that consistently throughout all, I mean, I know they have the option to answer, but have you consistently tried to gather that demographic information in relation to the interests that are being expressed?
Correct. Yes, we have.
Okay, and then second question, in regards to the housing, the affordable housing report that you guys are working on, how much information is being gathered from surrounding communities in terms of the trends and the historical data that has informed the evolution of that throughout the county?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the housing needs assessment, so at its core, housing needs assessments have become a requirement. I'm sure this is probably old news to you all by now, but I'll just kind of include this just in case it's not. Housing needs assessments are now becoming a requirement based on state law that was passed within the last 2 years, that are requiring local governments to produce a housing needs assessment. And basically doing that helps you unlock certain funds from the state that are able to go towards providing housing, things of that nature. And it's kind of one of those things where it's not really entirely clear yet what the penalties for not being in compliance with the housing needs assessment are, but it's definitely a good practice to do that. And now, more often than not, especially communities that are either updating their comprehensive plan or, in your case, starting their first comprehensive plan after doing basically after the state law came into place, it's good practice to basically wrap in the housing needs assessment as you're doing other long-term planning, because it's kind of a good opportunity to kind of just do everything all at once. So I think in terms of the direction that Keystone chose to go in terms of including the housing needs assessment as a part of this project, that was sort of the impetus there. It's right. It's an opportunity. It's sort of a requirement from the state. It's a great way to go ahead and kind of get um, this planning document sort of out of the way while you're also engaged in this other long range planning effort. So that's sort of the why. And what data we're able to comb through. This is where it does get a little bit tricky, and just in terms of you all being a new town, something that we had to caveat a little bit, and we had some back and forth back when Andrew was here and with Lindsay, in terms of what data do we pull. So as you all are aware, right, the census is kind of the main place. There's the main source of the truth in terms of accessing a lot of the housing data that kind of goes into the back end of the numbers in terms of owner occupancy, rental occupancy, how much people are paying for housing, et cetera. And so the way that the census carves up their geographies for a place like Keystone, since you're a new town, there's no defined, your town boundaries are not contiguous with where the census collects its data. So there's sort of two approaches that we've had to take. One is that historically, over the past 20 years, there's been a census designated place of Keystone, which roughly includes a lot of the boundaries, but is missing some little sections and does include kind of this weird parcel that goes out to the north side of town that includes a lot of Forest Service land. And that's a decent catch-all for pulling historic trends that go into the data for understanding your place-specific housing needs. Now, that being said, we were also able to take census parcels, which are a much smaller geography, collected at a smaller scale, and collate those to a rough approximation of the current town boundaries. Excuse me, getting over a cold. Um, and basically cobble those together, and we're able to do a little bit more projections based on that data, which is, I think, a better approximation because it includes more parcels that are actually within your town boundaries. It's a little wonky, but it's the best we can do, at least at this point in time. And according to EPS, it should still be good enough for satisfying the requirements of the state in terms of the housing needs assessment. So it gets a little wonky in terms of the place specific data, excuse me, associated with the housing needs assessment for Keystone itself. But Summit County, as you all are probably aware, recently completed a housing needs assessment as well. So we are able to pull a little bit of understanding of the trends that they were able to identify at the more county level and understand what they were able to sort of be paying attention to and what data they were collecting at the county scale as well. And you know, there will be opportunities to kind of look at some of the distinctions between the place specific need that is in relationship to Keystone itself and Summit County. Sorry, a lot of coughing there, so let me know if I need to repeat anything.
Okay, I appreciate very much that you're very numbers based and you have to use existing data or maybe try to derive data based on what you were given, but I would hope that there is more of an effort rather than to check the box with what is required from the state level or even what's been done from the county level to understand the demographics in Keystone and have a better understanding of the neighborhoods and the distinctions between the neighborhoods in Keystone that offer opportunities for affordable housing. And that's, I don't know if that's more minutia than what you guys are getting into, but I would hope that the affordable housing report would be a little bit more meaningful than derived data.
Well, yeah, so that's a good point, and I appreciate you saying that. So in the housing needs assessments are they can seem somewhat formulaic in the sense that there are a lot of requirements baked into what a housing needs assessment can be and what it has to look like and what it has to cover in order to be eligible for sort of meeting the criteria outlined in the state legislation. So there is sort of that, to call it something, that box checking exercise that is making sure that you all are kind of meeting the needs that are prescribed prescribed to you by the state. But that said, in the comprehensive plan, we're also going to be providing a robust amount of data with regards to what your demographic profile is for your community based on those different geographies we were talking about, so that you also have a bit of an understanding of like who makes up your community. In terms of like the distinctions between the neighborhoods, that's an interesting take, and something we haven't really talked about too much, in part because so much of the existing development is kind of carved up within the PUDs that are somewhat unique. Um, but I do think that you bring up a good point about the character areas that are formed by some of those different areas, and making sure that there's some sensitivity to place, if I'm understanding you correctly.
If I could just add a little bit to that, we're very, very fortunate in the fact that EPS has done a considerable amount of work in the county for quite a bit of time. And they not only know the history, but what has worked, what hasn't worked, and they actually are very familiar with the Keystone and the Snake River Basin.
That's true, and I can also add that EPS was involved in working with the state to craft some of the requirements for the housing needs assessments, so they have a little bit of extra information, which is always helpful to have. Let's see, any other comments at this point?
Yes, Dylan, this is John. Thank you. Thank you for going into so many granular details so far. I did just have a super quick question. Sorry if I missed it. Is there a survey end date?
Yes, we were going to run it through the end of September.
Okay, thank you. And then I would just bounce on kind of what Valerie was hitting on, the housing needs assessment. You mentioned that part of the Keystone specific one utilized the county housing needs assessment. Are they reliant on the same, for lack of a better word, flawed geographies that you were talking about, relying on for Keystone and having to parse it together? And so I guess it's nice, if that's true, it's nice that we're using the county's data, but if the data is flawed, then that really doesn't help us.
Yeah, so let me just kind of back up to the Summit County is using the purview of their housing needs assessment is looking at it countywide, and counties are a much easier data pull from the census. Where they get into specific areas, right around Keystone, they would be using probably the census designated place, because when they did their housing needs assessment, I believe that was like 2023. And so that would be, yeah, they would have been using the census designated place data. And I don't necessarily think that the way to think about it is that it's flawed. It's just that it's missing some specific geographies that are now making up what is your town boundary. So I think there's still some usefulness in terms of understanding the data at a higher level, or let's just say at like a granular, not a non-granular scale, but more as like a, basically here's some higher level information that you can overlay. And so I think that there's still usefulness in it. I think maybe the best way to think about yourself in terms of the housing needs assessment report that'll be made specifically for the town of Keystone from EPS, and then comparing that with Summit County, is just trying to understand a little bit of how you all as a towns are still working in relationship to the region that surrounds you, right? And so, right, trying to pull out from the Summit County Housing Needs Assessment Report, what are they paying attention to at the county scale, so that you are still understanding, what are they thinking about regionally, in the county that, you are finding yourselves within. And so I think the Keystone Housing Needs Assessment, that the first draft will be available next month. I think that is where you can be really digging into the details more so for what does the need look like in your community. But then in the Summit County report, what I would pay attention to, right, is what are they looking at big picture wise?
Thank you for that information. I would also add that I think really the three sensitive places that we were talking about, and you probably know Wintergreen, West Hills, and Malden Pass Village, right? And there's a clear distinction, I think, with those housing complexes in seasonality versus long-term livability. And the lack of participation maybe in some of those areas is probably tied to the fact that they're very seasonal based and people don't feel like they can call Keystone their home. And so I think that that in itself should be a data point that is probably pulled upon. And so I also wanted to ask about the demographics of participants. I know you had mentioned that it was being collected. Do you have a rough breakdown of what that looks like? Is it mostly second homeowners? Is it mostly retired folks, or what does that mostly look like?
In terms of the survey participation, let me pull that information, and I can give you a more detailed report, and I'll share that with Lindsay tomorrow. So then that way you all can just have that information. I would say in terms of the in-person engagements that we've been participating in, well, there's actually been a pretty good split between part-time residents and full-time residents.
All right, great, thank you. And then I know you mentioned the census earlier and the census collecting data, and I recall when the census comes through, they do door-to-door canvassing, mailing flyers, really a boots on the ground effort. Is there any boots on the ground effort that SE Group is doing? For like boots on the ground, going door to door, mailing flyers, to try to get engagement for the surveys or other feedback sources?
No, we have not been going door to door, boots on the ground, in part just because it's just an enormous budget killer. But what we have been doing is trying to pump out information through social media, through your town newsletter, and through the HOAs themselves to try and reach their participants. And I will say that what we have done is we've leveraged opportunities for staff to be able to go out to some locations in town and put up physical advertisements for the survey and some of our past in-person engagement. But in terms of knocking doors, that's just, no, we haven't been able to do that.
All right, and have we had any engagement, and this might be for staff too, from Vail Resorts and being able to communicate directly with the employees during the newsletters?
This week, Vail Resorts agreed to send the survey link out to all the people in Vail Resorts housing.
Great.
And I can also tell you that there were some Vail Resorts employees that were present at our last engagement, or a couple weeks ago too.
In addition, I requested certain departments put up the survey questionnaire in their locker rooms and things like that. So the public lunchrooms, or the employee lunchrooms.
All right, Dylan, I know I threw a lot at you there. Thank you so much, and I look forward to that data coming through.
Oh, of course, no, this is why I'm here.
Any
Okay.
other questions? Proceed.
All right, thank you, Ken. So, let's see. In terms of here's some initial things that we're starting to get some high-level priorities and values that we're seeing in terms of the engagement that we've held to date. Just pulling some of these trends out, just to be able to kind of daylight them to you at this point. So, some of the top priorities we're hearing from residents are parks and recreation, economic development, and creating a more strong sense of identity as a town. Transportation and connectivity, right? That's not news to you all. People were feeling like crossing Highway 6 is a super big safety issue and feeling like there's a little bit of this kind of weird gap around some of the community trail, the community path and the rec path about there's weird gaps where people just feel like it's a little confusing to navigate. And then big emphasis on environmental stewardship. And so I would say what's coming out of that is a lot of concentration on land preservation and making sure that the connection to nature is still strong. Let's see, in terms of the core values that people are expressing, the number one thing that comes up is conservation, in the sense that a lot of the people that have lived here for a long time or have owned property here for a long time have said that part of the reason that they chose to live in Keystone as opposed to somewhere like Breckenridge or Vail is that they feel like this really strong sense of connection to nature in Keystone, and wanting to make sure that, while there's an understanding that there's a need for more housing or a desire for maybe more year-round economic development opportunities, wanting to make sure that conservation is sort of at the forefront. We're hearing that housing affordability is sometimes a struggle for some people that are living here. We're hearing that ease of mobility is a little bit of a challenge, right? Thinking about places like Racer Drive as an example about getting around, or in some places where ADA accessibility might be a bit of a challenge. Um, and then there is a strong sense of community, right? For the people that have been here for a really long time, there's a lot of, we know our neighbors, we know the people that have lived here, where there's a sense that we help each other out. And then also a strong one desire that we've been hearing a little bit more about is more opportunities for health and wellness opportunities. The transportation and safety concerns, these shouldn't be a huge surprise, but Racer Drive is kind of always coming up as the major intersection where people are feeling like it's a big safety challenge. And then addressing some of the gaps in the community path and wayfinding. I remember when we started this, I expected to hear a lot more about crossing 6 and other opportunities to like add more sidewalk connections along 6. But something that's actually been a little bit of a surprise to me is that a lot more people are just saying that they want to see better opportunities to get people from certain parts of the community to the existing paths that you already have. So that was just something that kind of stood out to me as something that was a little counter to what I expected. Let's see. Some other initial public priorities. So in terms of sustainability and resilience, there's a big, something that we hear a lot about is whether we're considering wildfire hazard mitigation. And it was also interesting to see the article that just came out in Summit Daily about some of the work that you all are helping support with the private landowners about hazard mitigation, which is great. Snake River water quality is something that gets brought up a lot, and water conservation. In terms of economic development, a lot of people bring up Lakeside Village and then trying to find ways to activate River Run in the off season and increasing some of the appeal of the commercial areas, right? So some of the areas, like there's plenty of wonderful businesses in your community, but wanting to attract some of the curb appeal of some of the areas that are existing commercial spaces in town. And then folks are saying that there's more opportunities for hiking trails and mountain bike trails. We've also heard somewhat specifically lack of indoor recreation space and wanting to see more opportunities for public river access and picnic areas and playgrounds. So I'm going to pause here because these are some of the trends that came up, but we'll kind of shift gears. So I want to just pause and see if anything stood out to people. Is this surprising? Is this something, is there anything here that stood out to you as something you weren't expecting to see people listing as either top priorities or values that they have?
John?
Thank you. Dylan, just want to kind of understand the verbiage here. So top priorities, core values, and then top concerns. Is it in that order of importance that you think that they were called out in like 1, 2, and 3, 1 being top priorities, 3 being top concerns? Is that safe to assume that that's kind of what I took from that?
Sorry, yeah, let me say that I think that was maybe a little confusing way that I presented this. But the major concerns that were identified were mostly around this transportation and safety. So with regards to crossing Highway 6, the Razor Drive intersection specifically, and some of the gaps in the ability for people to navigate more contiguously the existing community path. But that's kind of the concerns in terms of priorities and values. So values, think of those a little bit more as like a snapshot in time, right? So these are things that people say that they're valuing about Keystone or that they think is a valuable aspect of Keystone. And then priorities, think of those as a little bit more aspirational in the sense that the priorities are things that people either recognize as something that's either currently inherent to Keystone or may not be currently, but is something that should be prioritized by the town moving forward. Does that help clarify?
So basically, you switched slides, by the way. For the core values, those are things that we think, or that respondents think are currently positives about the town, right? So basically, we're saying that housing affordability is good in town, there's easy mobility in town.
Correct. Yeah. One interesting thing that's been brought up about housing affordability during the last public engagement, there was actually really surprising in some senses that there were several respondents that did not think that housing affordability was really much of a challenge at all. And I will say that in terms of some of the other communities or municipalities within Summit County, you do have quite a bit of deed restricted housing. And now we can obviously add the caveat that a lot of that deed restricted housing is, specifically sanctioned off for people that work for Vail Resorts. So that is an obvious caveat. But with regards to the percent share of deed restricted housing, you're doing quite well by comparison to your peer communities within Summit County. And so there's definitely a perception by at least a lot of the people that have participated in some of the in-person engagement opportunities today that housing affordability is something that currently the town of Keystone is doing fairly well.
So is there a way, and thank you for that explanation, and you had mentioned that the units that are typically associated with certain large employers in the area, there's a caveat to that. I mean, is there a way to include those or exclude those to a certain point in our housing affordability or housing needs assessment? Because
Absolutely.
to me, an advantage just for a certain employer, not necessarily for our citizens.
Totally. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And that's something that I should say we have already started doing. So we've sussed out where we have in the housing needs assessment, where we have the call outs to deed restricted housing. We are separating that out by what is deed restricted housing for specifically Vail Resorts employees and what is other deed restricted housing.
Amazing, thank you. And then, no, that was it, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Proceed.
Okay, so switching a little bit of gears here. So this is the 3 Mile Plan map. And so the 3 Mile Plan, for those that maybe are not familiar or haven't really come across one, it's something that is a requirement. And if you are planning on annexing territory, you will, part of the state requirements is that you would have to have a 3 Mile Plan. These are typically updated on a 5-year cadence, 5 to 10 year cadence. Most communities do roughly around 5 years. And so a lot of communities address them very differently. And so what you're looking at here on this map, this sort of bubble, this is sort of the 3 mile area that surrounds your current town boundaries, which is highlighted here in gray. And so what we worked on with the Planning and Zoning Commission is trying to understand if you all were, not saying that you are by any means going to be annexing any new territory at any point. You may not. That is up for you all to decide as a community moving forward. But where we kind of come in is helping you try to understand as you're going through this portion of the comprehensive plan that is addressing where you would consider annexing territory within the next, let's say, 5 years, within the 3 mile sort of radius or sorry, diameter around your community. What would you be prioritizing in terms of annexing land? And so we kind of came up with these sort of 3 criteria that you would be using. One is this contiguous geography, right? So as you all are, I'm sure, quite aware, in your current town boundaries, there are some interesting gaps that do kind of form, right? So an obvious example is around the wintergreen parcel. So thinking about how there are some sections of that area where you could be either in the town of Keystone boundary or in Summit County boundary, but if you're standing on the ground in person, right, it would be a little confusing as to where that kind of starts and stops. So there's sort of this wanting to kind of create this sort of sense of contiguity between some parcels where, just through the incorporation process, either, whatever might have transpired in terms of how the town boundaries were initially agreed upon, potential for future annexation could include trying to shore up some of those inconsistencies around the contiguity of the geography that surrounds your current town boundaries. And so that was one of the criteria. The other one was around contiguous ownership, which is somewhat related, right? In the sense that, maybe another example is around Mountain House, where there's sort of that, sense of ownership around Vail Resorts, right? And thinking about that they are owning quite a lot of the adjacent land and wanting to kind of shore up some of the contiguity of ownership of the underlying land and bringing that in or within the town boundaries. And then a contiguous sense of place, right? So in some ways, it's harder for communities to kind of continue to build upon this sense of unified identity or kind of creating an established sense of place when there's this sort of like weird start and stop that kind of occurs between where's town boundary and where's not town boundary, right? If you could be walking in and out of it in the matter of a few feet, it can sometimes be a little bit difficult for people to kind of create a sort of shared sense of place around a town identity. And so those were sort of the three criteria that that the Planning and Zoning Commission identified as important. So based on that, I'm hoping that this is viewable at a scale that's easily digestible for you all, but hopefully you all maybe have a version of this in your packet. But these areas that are in this sort of white and red hatched areas were what we identified as parcels that could be considered for future annexation that meet this sort of annexation criteria. And then sort of another one that's, kind of maybe thinking about in the background is also kind of trying to understand like that sense of conservation, right? So wanting to also not be just annexing or thinking too hard about bringing in land that's not completely out of scope. And especially since a lot of the land that does surround your town boundaries that are not necessarily within these parcels are unincorporated Summit County or national forest. And it's totally possible to annex U.S. Forest Service land, but it's a really weird process and not necessarily something that is a normal thing that towns or municipalities do unless there's some sort of other purpose that's also being achieved. So an example might be, you might have heard that recently the town of Nederland, Colorado just acquired Eldora, their ski resort, which obviously serves on U.S. Forest Service land. And there's this sort of an interesting situation where what they were really interested in was being able to be the people that were kind of taking over the ownership of the ski resort when it went on the market, but it just kind of so happens to be on Forest Service land. So it's not necessarily about annexing Forest Service land. It's more about annexing a specific use that meets it's in line with the town's sort of goals and objectives, but not necessarily. And it just so happens that the underlying land ownership is U.S. Forest Service land. So kind of a lot there. We have a draft of the 3 Mile Plan that we're happy to share with you all as well. It's been through the Planning Commission. Lindsay's had the opportunity to take a look at it as well as your town attorney. So we're happy to share that with you if you want to take a look. Not a super long document. I think it's less than 10 pages, but it's more of just it's an exercise in trying to understand if you were to annex land around you, what would you be interested in annexing and why? So, any questions on the 3 Mile before we jump a little further? Oh, Carol, I see you raised your virtual hand.
Yes, I did. Thank you. What's the role of municipal services in annexation selection criteria?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked. So, part of the process. So let's say you want to move forward with annexing Mountain House, for example. There's kind of two processes that can transpire from there. The town can initiate a request to annex that land, and then they would need to put out a notice. So to the landowners that are within that area, and if 50% or more, if 50% basically plus one approve, then of this idea for an annexation request, then the next step would be that the town would need to then basically provide a report that outlines who are the municipal and or private and or other service providers that are operating within this area, and what would be the things that the town would then have to undertake. So let's say that you would be responsible for road, you would inherit new roads, or you would inherit new water mains or things of that nature, or new utilities. Then you would have to outline what those are, and then how you plan on making sure that you have the revenue in place to be able to service those areas without causing any undue harm to your existing service area, right? So you cannot take on new liabilities without without it also. Let me re-say that. You can't put together this annexation request if your service area plan doesn't say that by taking on this new land, you're going to be doing a disservice to the obligations you currently have. So that's sort of a step that you would have to take, and there's a formal exercise you can go through with your town attorney on that. But it's a process, and there's a sort of formal requirement, and it would involve making sure that the utility providers in the area are also notified as well. And then in terms of what the town would be taking on, it would be anything that would fall within the purview of your existing sort of obligations. So let's say you are a town that is providing roadway maintenance and sidewalk maintenance, and you also provide trails that are going to be now within the new boundaries of this area within Mountain House. You would have to outline what it is the town is specifically going to be responsible for, and where the money is going to come to service that, and as part of that service area plan.
Thanks, Dylan. That was very helpful.
Any other questions?
Can I make a point?
Yes.
Hi, this is Jennifer Madsen, the town attorney. I just wanted to make a point for clarification so everybody knows that annexations are legislative decisions, and they are not subject to really, there's some criteria, as long as you meet certain requirements. Contiguity is one of the big criteria, 1/6 contiguity. But as long as the property to be annexed meets that criteria, it's a legislative decision of the town council as to whether to annex that property. You can say no for any reason at all.
But 51% of the landowners in the area to be annexed have to agree.
It's 50%. There's different types of annexations, and one type is 50% of the landowners need to sign a petition.
In this particular case of all those parcels, there's exactly one land.
Right, exactly. Yes, so you have to get, the town of Keystone cannot unilaterally annex these properties.
Any other questions? Go ahead, John.
Thank you. Okay, so housing needs assessment. We've kind of talked a little bit about what's been included and what's in some of the back end there, so I might breeze through this a little bit, especially since we'll be making sure to provide you all the draft after it's had the opportunity to be daylighted to the Planning and Zoning Commission in August. But just some initial insights that we can kind of go ahead and pull out now is that townhouses and condos comprise about 90% of sales in Keystone and about 71% of all housing units. The median cost of new townhomes and condos is around $825,000, and that's as of 2024. And the median price of single-family homes is about $2.75 million as of 2025. And then rent affordability is about 26.8% of Keystone renters are cost burdened, while in the county and the rate is about 43.5%. So this kind of goes back to that, one of those value points around how, in some ways, one of the things that the town of Keystone is doing well, both sort of in the data and as a public perception, is that housing affordability is going fairly well, with the obvious caveat that there's a lot of deed restricted units that are sort of blocked off for a specific subsection of the population. Keystone has a higher concentration of vacation rentals at about 82.7% than Summit County as a whole, which is about 61.2%. And I think I saw that Carol raised a virtual hand.
Yes. How do you define cost burdened? That must be some kind of data
Yeah, so we use basically there's a commonly accepted rule of thumb, which is that if you're paying more than 30% of your gross income on your housing, then you are considered cost burden. And if you're paying more than 50% of your gross income monthly income towards housing costs, then you are considered severely cost burden. But it's the typical rule of thumb is that if you're paying more than 30% of your monthly gross income towards your housing, then you are considered cost burdened.
Thank you.
Of course.
Any other questions? John?
Thank you. Could you define what you mean by rent affordability as a section? Is it very similar to that cost burden definition you just provided?
Correct. Yeah. So this is saying that 26.8% of people that are renting in Keystone are paying more than 30% of their monthly income towards their housing costs.
And is it safe to say that for the Wintergreen parcel that for the data for the town of Keystone, it only includes the 3 buildings that Vail Resorts owns?
No. It also includes the Light Deck housing.
But it does not include the rest of the units that are charging at 110% of the line? Okay. I don't know how the data is allowed to be interpreted, but I think that that's a significant flaw in the data because all of the housing that is accounted for in that large deed restricted area is all subsidized in some way, shape, or form, whether by employer or LIHTC, and it's missing the portion of that housing which is unaffordable is not being included in that, is being included in the county. So I think that that's a flaw causing skewed results on both sides there. And I know we can't build this based on what the future might hold, but I don't feel comfortable with knowing the background of that and having that data.
Could you give me a little bit more information, John, about what it is you think is specifically being missed?
Yeah, so I mean, with the
Yeah, just one question.
Yeah.
Just one question. Does this include all of the renters who are in the Vail Resorts controlled housing too?
That is a very good question. I actually don't know. So let me find that out and get back to you.
Because if it is, I can see how that could drive that.
Yeah, that was my first question. I'm sorry.
My knee jerk would be that it is, but I don't want to give you the wrong impression. So let me find out for sure and get back to you.
Is there a way, because I agree with John that we have a particular problem in the way that that parcel is laid out with the expensive 120% AMI housing plus that's over there, that's really not our community, but really the residents are part of our community, and our workforce lives in that housing. Is there a way to somehow put into the needs assessment the understanding of what the impact is if that housing were to be included?
Well, we can certainly make the caveat. I don't think that there's anything wrong with the idea of trying to pull out some of that area in specific and just say, especially since it's an area that's called out within the 3 mile plan, of saying in this area, like, should this area also be considered for future consideration within the town of Keystone? Here's some additional information on that particular area. So I don't really see anything wrong with that. It would be a little nuanced in terms of pulling out the specifics on that, but it's something that can be done.
And Dylan, I know you had asked earlier for some more context, right? For context, and these are very rough numbers, right? But Vail employee housing can be subsidized by the employer, and a Vail employee can pay anywhere from, I believe it's $420 a month to roughly $800 a month for housing, versus somebody in the Wintergreen lottery housing, whatever you want to call it, pays 120% of the AMI, which I haven't looked recently, but the last time I was looking for myself was, I believe, $1,800 for a 1-bedroom or upwards of $2,500 for a 2-bedroom, plus parking at, I think, $150 a car per month, plus utilities. And versus the Vail units, you don't have to pay housing or utilities, and your parking is $25 a month. So, and that's the big gap I'm seeing, right? Is that is one of the larger housing complexes in the county, and so I just, even if there's a way that we could do the housing need assessment with the rental affordability, technically as Keystone, and then if we include all of Wintergreen, that might be a good thing for us to get some valuable information.
Yeah, right now I think the way we have it parsed out is we have the units within Wintergreen that are included within the town of Keystone, but it shouldn't be any extra burden to figure out based on the units that comprise Wintergreen holistically. In fact, it might actually be a little easier, but.
Awesome, and I just have one more question. Anywhere with your survey, is there, and maybe in the 3-mile analysis there was this included, but was there anywhere that there was captured information on people that wanted to live in Keystone but couldn't based on housing affordability and now live in a neighboring community?
Yeah, that's a really good, it's an interesting point, and that would be something I would really love to figure out ways of better integration into. I mean, I guess you all can tell me if you think it's worth trying to figure out a way to kind of ask that question at the broader, maybe Summit County level, or maybe expanding out to a larger region. I mean, in some ways, I suppose anecdotally, right, the demand is probably infinite, right? I mean, I imagine that if should housing costs be somewhere right sized to the market, then anybody that has the potential to live in somewhere place like Keystone would probably opt to make that decision. But I don't know that there's. I'll give the more direct answer to your question, which is we haven't been able to figure out a good way of asking that question up front. But it's certainly something I think about a lot and would love to figure out a way to get at that question more holistically.
And one way that I think that might be possible, right, when you engage with the employees that live in the county, or excuse me, in the town here, do you feel like you could leave employee housing and find housing in Keystone? And
Yeah.
I bet a high percentage would say no.
Right, that's a good point. So one question that is included is, or that we've started asking is if your housing needs are met in Keystone, which is maybe another way of asking that question. Because then also thinking about how for certain people make housing related choices based on their lifestyle needs at the specific time, right? So you think about the people that have maybe moved to the town of Keystone in their mid-20s for work and then choose to live in Keystone for the next 10 to 20 years, right? And they enter new phases of their lives, or maybe they start having children, or they're maybe taking care of somebody's parents, and so their housing needs start to change in terms of what it is that their lifestyle is dictating to them. And then so for some people, maybe they can't make that choice to then maybe change housing units based on the circumstances that they're working with at the time. And so this is an example of something that we're dealing with a lot in Steamboat Springs, where we're working on their comprehensive plan too, is that what we heard a lot in their community just organically through the engagement feedback was that there are a lot of people that have been in the community for a long time, and then once their lifestyle changed, they weren't able to stay in Steamboat Springs and had to start moving further out into other portions of Routt County. And so that is something that's, we've found people start to broach some versions of what it is you're driving at through the lens of how their lifestyle changes have dictated whether or not housing within the community that they're either living in or wanting to stay in is maybe not working for them, or that's not something that they're able to figure out. But yeah, so that's kind of a toughie, because I think that there's a lot of different factors that go into it. So it would be a kind of a nebulous question, but it'd be really, I like where your head's at with it. I really do.
So, yeah, and I appreciate that question. Do you think that there's a way to possibly get at are your housing needs met for what you see as a future for yourself, right? Because
Mhm.
a 20-year-old that moves out of here to ski instruct for a couple of seasons, I bet their housing needs are met in the dorms that are operated out here, but is it met for the future when they want to settle down and have a family or grow and build roots in the community? And I bet that that's a different answer than our housing needs met right now, excuse me.
Yeah. Sorry, John and I could probably go down this rabbit hole for the remainder of your time here, but are there any other questions that we want to make sure we ask here?
No, this is Dan. I was just going to make the comment that I think it is a lot that we need to explore. And I think this was just kind of give us a sense of where you were, because I had another dozen questions, which we could spend hours, like you said. So I'm hoping that from a planning perspective, we'll be doing this in more detail when we talk housing. Correct?
Yeah.
Absolutely. You forward me on those questions, I appreciate that.
And I will certainly also add the caveat that this is just intended to be a little bit of like pulling out some initial numbers that I can start to daylight to you all at this stage. But again, the draft full housing needs assessment report is going to have a lot more information, a lot more detail, and it's going to show some of its work too, just to kind of give you a bit better context of what are some of the inputs and what are the things that what are the questions it's starting to answer. So yeah, so look forward to that in August, because I think that'll be something that maybe could provide either some additional detail or who knows, maybe it'll also raise additional questions too that are areas that need to be explored in greater detail, just to make sure that it's serving you all and the needs of your community. Well, recognizing that we're already at 5, I'm just going to go ahead and move here to the next steps, which are down the road. So in September, like I mentioned, we were hoping to have a community priorities workshop, and that's kind of just a way that we labeled in our scope of work, basically some initial recommendations that we would start to put together based on all the different ways that we've been collecting information on your community up till now through public engagement, through data, just to start, basically getting some of the sniff test for some of the recommendations that we would otherwise put in the comprehensive plan, and start to daylight those to your community and see how people are reacting to them. Having a first draft of the plan is something that we anticipate being able to start working towards in September. So we're starting to put some of the scaffolding in place now, but we don't want to get too far ahead of the engagement, because that's going to be a big portion that'll drive a lot of the recommendations in the plan. But some of the initial visioning and things that are starting to come to fruition now, we can start to put a little bit of pen to paper. But we're hoping to be able to give you a first draft that we can start working towards the end of September, so that you can start to react to that and give us a little bit better feedback in terms of what you need out of this plan. And then, so next month in August, we'll be presenting the draft of the housing needs assessment to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And then after that, we'll be able to touch back in with you all with just a little bit of a recap of what we've heard to date through August in terms of all of the engagement that we've done, give you a bit better understanding of what's going on with the housing needs assessment after it's been through the initial review of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then start to work towards a final plan and coming back to you all in the fall for hopefully trying to get it adopted. About that, I'm going to stop.
No, yeah, you're good. Stop sharing. So I was just like, that's a great timeline for the future and looking at the final plan adoption. How are the suggestions that we've given today to be implemented into those draft and final plans?
Well, I can tell you that I've been taking some notes on the background here, and I'll be coordinating with Lindsay, and I coordinate every other week. So he and I will be working towards figuring out how we want to make sure we're wrapping those up into our draft documents and do our next touch points.
Amazing, thank you.
Dylan, thank you very much for the update. We look forward to the future updates as we're going forward with the process.
Of course, thank you all for having me.
At this point, I'll turn to the financial update.
And I will let our financial director, Henry Fox, lead us through this.
All right, good evening, I'm Fox, Finance Director. Basically, in your packet, you guys have all the financial information along with my notes. So my question to you is, would you prefer that I walk through those, or would you rather we just open it up for any questions that you have?
Any thoughts, council? I'm happy with just, if we have questions,
I would agree with that.
That's right.
if we have questions, we'll ask.
All right, wonderful.
Well, I'll start with the first one. What is the community development compliance deposit? I just don't know what that is.
So that is a deposit that one of the development contractors had to put down for the landscaping. So we'll probably hold that for about 2 years until we have the landscaping.
And then if they put the flowers in that we say, then they get that back.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Most contractors will purchase a bond, and this contractor is going to do full cash deposit.
Okay.
Is that deposit drawn down as the contractor completes various stuff?
No, it'll be end of the project at CO if they've completed,
Wow.
they get the deposit.
So it's really not one we can use. It's just like a holding. Okay.
Could you explain, I know you had a comment about the utilities revenue on the page 13 graph. It just seems like utilities has spiked this year as a revenue source compared to last year. Could you explain that a little bit more? And it seems like it's a recurring thing with all the months. I'm happy for more, by the way, but just...
Right, so really my understanding is like when we incorporated, we weren't getting some of that utility revenue. And so what happens is then the vendor is responsible for making those returns. And so that's what's happening right now.
Great, thank you.
Comments? All right. Is there anything else?
And that's about it. I mean, as you guys can see, our tax revenue is ahead of our schedule, which is exciting news. So hopefully that continues, and but we'll keep monitoring everything and updating you on issues as we see them, or more information as it comes to us.
I'm sorry, I did have one just silly question. I see that we now hold the assets for all the roads.
Yes.
Is that all the roads, or is it just the roads that we're now taking responsibility for? I mean, and how does that get valued? How does that get valued?
That's the roads that were owned by the county and transferred to us on the annexation. So it's not all the roads, it's not the private roads. And our engineer did evaluation for us based on replacement cost. It's pretty standard numbers they use across the state on this issue. It's a strange thing to value the roads. It's not like we can sell them.
But there are assets.
They are.
They are assets, and it's important for our financial statement, and you'll see that in the audit when you guys get it during the next meeting. And it just helps everybody understand that that's just more funds that we're going to need to be able to maintain those roads and keep them up.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Heike. And with that, the next item is the discussion of short-term rental code and parking. Is that Mr. Town Manager?
And I will pass this to our town clerk, Madam.
Is there a way to ask that this gets pushed back later in the meeting in case Aaron's able to make, because he was one of the local parties for this last time? If anyone's not opposed. I he's, it's a that's a serious call right now, but he might be able to.
I know it's important to him, but this is an important thing that we move forward.
Okay.
And if he doesn't show up and we don't, at what point would we want to go to it? If we could set it, if we can assure we get to it today, whether he's here or not, that would be fine, but I think it's very important we get to it today.
So I have no objection to moving it down further in case he were to come. Given the description of the event he's at, I would be shocked if he could even, if he's going to be here in the next hour.
I'm also comfortable with that assessment.
All right. So then let's just go ahead with it and then we'll see. We'll probably have another chance to invite it later. In the council meeting.
This will be, it's an ordinance, so there will be plenty of time to weigh in on this in the future too.
So over to you, Mr. Town Manager.
And over to our town clerk.
All right, good afternoon, Town Council. I'm Patty Steelu, the Town Clerk, and this is a revision of some of the recommendations that we brought forth at the last work session. There was a lot of discussion about what a parking pass might look like and what that could be to kind of take account of all of the different existing parking passes as well as communities that might not have those established already. So the language that was proposed in this version of the staff report is 1 parking pass per allowable parking space as submitted in their parking plan and the application shall be provided to all renters upon check-in or display on their dashboard. This pass can be provided by the homeowners association or a property management company, so that would cover the existing passes. If there is no pass provided by the homeowners association or property management company, guests should be provided with a pass that includes the address and unit number of the property. And that is what is on the table.
So, thank you for that. So in the situation where the property management company might manage a home that is adjacent to public land, public roads, their parking passes could still be that, right? Okay. I guess my comment for the group is what I'm viewing this as is for folks that own private lots, HOAs mostly, don't break the system. If they have a system they want to have and they want to enforce it that way, awesome. I think really for me where this is turning into a problem is when folks park on public roads and cause problems, and that's when I think people should have the ability to have the information for you and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where my concern is that I would like to see information for those units that may be close in proximity to public roads that are impacted.
Doesn't this address that?
Yes, except for the question I asked is if I'm a property management company and I rent or manage a property that is accessible to public roads, it does not address it. Because I can issue my own parking permit that says John's property management company 123, and that's all it says.
But it also requires it to address the
No, it doesn't. It says if there is no parking pass provided by the homeowners association or property management company, guests should be provided a pass with the address and unit number. So if John's property management company provides a pass that says 123 and that's all it says on it, and then I go park on Razor Drive, that doesn't allow me to know what unit that's for. So I would propose, I guess what I'm trying to get at here is for associations or property management companies that operate within private garages or private lots or private service lots, whatever the technical legal verbiage would be, that their existing parking passes would work, but if they operate on a public road, that's what I'd like to see more information provided there.
What information would you like to see?
I think that the address and unit number is a very good compromise to what we were talking about before. I still think that the phone number of the responsible agent is something that's very easy to produce in mass. Again, my comments last time were, I want to make this easy on the property management companies, right? Print off 1,000 of these, and you can just give one to every single person, or print off nice plastic ones that you can use every time. And as long as the information doesn't change, then you won't have to redo these or remake them. And that's what I view as a simple compromise. I don't think we need, all our ESTR rules and regulations on here, a map to the local liquor store or anything like that. I think we need to keep it simple, but also be practical in being able to resolve the problem of it.
Let me ask, Mr. Town Manager.
Yeah, if I may, it doesn't do us any good for SDR enforcement if people are calling the responsible agents directly. We then have no record of this complaint and cannot hold the violation against people. However, I don't see a problem because almost everything, condo buildings are next to public roads too. And people who are parking in Silver Mill could be parking in Keystone's parking lot. I don't think it would be a problem with any of our property managers or condo associations to require the address or unit number to be on any parking pass. And that's really all the information you need to make a complaint that should be addressed directly.
So while I like the notion of that, I would disagree that I think that there are some people that would have a problem with that. Primarily the folks that have the plastic pre-made ones that are garage access.
But all those have unit numbers on them.
Do they?
Every one I've seen. It's not that big a problem to put down. I couldn't imagine the risk you would have with forgery if you didn't have the unit number on that type of pass.
Okay. I'm okay with that. I just want to be respectful to our constituents that are very vocal about this issue.
Yeah, I mean, we can double check with the management companies, but it makes no logical sense to issue a parking pass if you don't know if the person who has it is legitimate or not. So I assume, you have to assume all parking passes, at least at the unit.
In fact, those that are issued by property management companies, and every HOA that I know of has a requirement that you list the unit being rented and the expiration date. Because it has no sense, if you don't have the expiration date, you have nothing to enforce against.
So is anyone against requiring the property unit, the address and unit number for all parking passes regardless of if they are from an HOA or not?
I don't see it as, in HOAs, it's not needed because it's already required by the HOAs of the management company.
So if it's already required, what's the negative requirement?
Yeah.
It's hard for me to understand.
Yeah, I guess your concern is about public roads. And for instance, in predominantly Loveland Pass Village. In Loveland Pass Village, it is illegal to park on the street. Am I correct?
Not enforced.
So the immediate remedy is for that person who sees that car there, is to call the law enforcement and ask them to enforce the law and give that person a ticket. There's a remedy for that, already exists.
So my question we have language in here that's two different versions. When I look at the second one, I think it's more describing what you think is appropriate. Did a great job.
Yes, but he wants more on it.
Well,
The second one's the one we're talking about. We're not talking about the first one.
No, I know. But you were saying that HOAs already require the unit number and address to be on there. So why are we distinguishing between those? Why aren't we just saying all parking passes must include property address and unit address? Why are you missing, why is there missing here?
Town manager?
Well, this is up to you, but I kind of agree with Councilmember Hagenau that it's not overly burdensome to require the property managements and condos to also have unit address or unit number. I mean, it can say Silver condo and the unit number, it doesn't need the physical address, but yeah.
I think that was my proposal last time.
I have a question for the town clerk on this one. If I were to call the hotline and complain about a car from Silver Mill Unit 123, would they be able to understand or deduce the address for Silver Mill Unit 123?
Not in its current form, but it's possible with the future enhancements that we're working on that it would be able to.
So thank you, that's my concern.
Now, let me ask a question. Silverville specifically, I don't think Silverville has a problem, do they, with the system?
I'm using Silver Mill as a random condo, right? Gateway Unit 123, Buffalo Unit 123, right? Any name of a condo building, if I called and I said this parking pass says they're from Buffalo 123, and I have a problem with how they're parked, would they be able to deduce that with the current system or?
The system is being implemented by Blue Vector. Will that be able to be handled?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Then I think what I'm hearing is that this version, the second version, but make it generic as opposed to differentiating HOAs, short-term rentals that are through associations of property management and other. Is that correct? So I'm going back to yours, that you were concerned that we were differentiating the two groups. We should just have one request that everybody has the unit on the pass.
Yeah, I just don't understand why we're making it more complicated. If everyone already has that, just all parking passes must have unit address and unit number.
I think we're all,
I'm agreeing with that.
Cool.
Or just unit, I'd say address or unit.
Address or.
What if we said address or building name and unit number?
Unit number alone.
If applicable, unit number if applicable. Because if it's just address, then I can just have a sticky note that says Silver Mill on it. And that doesn't really help.
No, address is very specific. It's 100 Durham Road, unit so-and-so.
I thought we had just talked about not having a specific address because
But no, you just said address.
Yes.
I was just responding to what you just said. And that's why, and that's the problem with the system right now. The system dealt with address, didn't deal with condo association, which is what everyone recognizes as the unit that's offending. No one knows what the building address is in a particular unit number. In places like Gateway, it's even worse because the known address, the official address is totally different, and unit number is totally different from the actual unit number on the door.
So what I'm getting at is I don't care if we have naming versus actual address, as long as if there's a parking pass on a car and it's an offender vehicle, we can identify what unit that is. And I don't care if it's a physical address, if it's the name of the building, whatever that needs to be, I'm okay with as long as we can actually deduce where that vehicle is from.
But in Lone Pass Village, wouldn't it have to be the address because there is no?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm having a very hard time following this conversation.
well, I guess my question is, does, John, have you followed this? I mean, to write this?
I have followed this and
what do you think you've heard?
I would be 100% comfortable adopting this as written. And if we find that there are condos or property managers where their pass is being used that are not identifiable for some reason, then we readdress it. But I think this really does solve
But why would we put it in there to begin with and just make them identify themselves rather than waiting until it is a problem?
Well, then we'll rewrite it. I'm also happy, one parking pass per allowable parking space that includes the address or unit number of the property, shall be provided to all renters upon check-in for display on their dashboard. This pass can be provided by, we don't even need to go there.
Do we think this addresses the issues?
I think that, the question, does it address the issue you
I think we're making it overcomplicated, but.
What about John's last verbiage that he said that the single words is this one parking pass per allowable parking space as submitted in the parking plan and the application should be, which includes the unit address or, what was the other word, John?
It includes the address or unit number of the property shall be provided to all renters upon check-in for display on their dashboard.
Valerie?
So I know this problem really varies association to association. And one of the situations that I heard that's been occurring in Loveland Pass Village that I don't know who we hold accountable or how to address it is that one of the homes has a listing for 4 surface spots and a garage. And that's what they submit to us, that's what they submit to the property management company. But in reality, the owner parks his car on one of the surface spots and the garage is full of cracks. So if the property management company is still issuing 4 surface spot permits, we still haven't solved the problem. And that is something that those homeowners in that association are dealing with, not only in the winter, but in the summer, as Kindred has all of their employees staying in that home, and you have 10 cars parked on the street and exceeding the known parking allowance. So who's accountable?
If I may, it will solve the problem for short-term renters, because if the car is on the street, it's identified from that parcel. That parcel owner has a violation. If it happens several times, that parcel owner is no longer short-term renting their property. We are able to identify the problem, and we go to the renter, why aren't you parking there? Well, because he didn't give me adequate. It doesn't matter, actually. It's a violation. The homeowner will have to figure out how to get those cars on his property. It means emptying his garage or moving his own car. It wouldn't solve the Kindred problem because those are long-term renters who would not be impacted by the short-term regulations here.
And then they just need to call the police and say that there's somebody parked illegally on the street.
Right.
But nobody really likes to call the police, and for some of our new ordinances and Keystone enforcement, the police are still reluctant to even respond, just FYI.
Please, good God, I have not heard that. Okay, I have not
I'll
heard.
give you an example
Yeah,
after
yeah.
the meeting.
But I need to know this, because if our police are not responding to our citizens, this is a much bigger problem than we're addressing here. So if police are refusing to respond, I really should have heard of this long before this meeting from a council member tonight. I should have heard of it a while ago. Someone should, they need to come in, they need to file an official complaint. They need to let me know. I can't fix a problem if I'm unaware of it.
So, Carol was that.
Carol?
Hi, I just wanted to add that I heard the mayor mention early on that you need a drop dead date, day the rental's over. I agree, and that seems to have fallen off the discussion.
So,
If I may, Carol, that's because some of the units have one parking pass. And they don't produce one for everyone else. I kept using my condo as an example. If I have a renter in my condo, I don't also have a parking pass for me. There's one parking pass associated. We get it once a year. And it's tied into my...
There's no dates.
And there's no dates because there aren't duplicates with that address.
The trouble is, John, that in most associations that have open parking, the owners have more passes than they allow a renter to have. And so as a result, an owner could hand out 3 passes and be parking in short-term rental units.
But once again, this is something where we can rely on the condo associations and the property managers to, if you have a situation like that, it is probably incumbent upon your HOA to ensure that the parking passes are dates.
And so I guess a follow-up question on that, when you were talking about the violations and right, cars being tagged with parking passes and violations coming from that, what happens if I, as a renter, just keep the parking pass and start parking like a jerk and get violations? Are you then liable as the property manager?
Yeah,
Property manager.
the property owner is
Property
liable then. The property owner is liable. So, like I said, I think we are trying to second guess on how to manage these properties. I think our concern is that we can identify vehicles that are parked where they shouldn't be parked.
But I can't unless I have a.
It depends on, in your building, that is true, but not necessarily all buildings.
Name one building in Keystone that has individual passes.
Okay, a single family in Loveland Pass that has 4 parking
But
passes,
you have.
could make up 4 permanent parking passes, and that's all they have for that unit. And they don't need to keep printing off new parking passes for every group that comes in.
Because I know in condo associations, if you don't have an expiration date on them, there's no way to enforce it.
And there is, in my condo, it's enforceable.
So what I'm
So
saying,
you have one, but if you have condo associations that, the way the property management companies operate, all right, is they have a pass, and they give that to the owner, and the completion of the rental pass isn't any good anymore because it has an expiration date on it. If you don't require that expiration date, and that owner can keep the pass, or the renter can keep the pass, they can keep coming back, and they can park in that lot during day skiing parking and everything else.
Yeah,
There's no way, if it's a fungible pass like that, that is a paper pass, because most of those passes are not, property management companies do not deal with plastic passes that have to be returned.
but Mayor, they do in my condo. And,
In Winter Park.
well, there is nothing different in the situation. I'm just trying to not create a law that causes a problem where we don't have to cause a problem when the law we're trying to pass will address that problem.
Right.
And the individual property managers who do that it would be incumbent upon them to include an expiration date. HOAs that have multiple passes that are given out each time, clearly it's incumbent upon them to put the expiration date. The expiration date doesn't matter to someone who's calling in complaining that there's a car parked where it shouldn't be. They just need to know where that car should be.
But they don't know if it shouldn't be there.
and that's on the property.
Well, what are we trying, I guess?
What are we trying to solve?
What are we trying to?
I was happy with the verbiage that was in here
Yeah.
because we weren't requiring something unique of the property management companies because they've already adapted to this problem for the company.
Yeah, and I agree, I said I don't think it's a burden to require them to put a unit number or address on any
I agree.
I
pass.
agree with that.
But then you said, but they should also put,
Well,
The
then
debate,
if you change the word to a minimum of,
No, no.
oh, who's that voice?
in other words, at a minimum, they have to have that information.
So I think at the end of the day, right,
I don't want to give them latitude, a property management company latitude to say, I don't have to put a number on it anymore, because the town lost trumps.
Well, you can say at minimum, I'm done with that. The question I think we were debating is that do you have an expiration date?
Yeah.
And I'm kind of going with the argument that we don't do that.
I would also echo that, and I think that if it becomes an issue for a property manager, they need to be the one to identify that and change it.
Well, the issue is, it's not the issue for the property manager. It's not a property manager. It's an HOA issue.
Well,
The HOA can require that. Town laws don't trump HOA. We always set the minimum. They can always go above. And
what I'm viewing the issue as is somebody keeps the parking pass, gets violations on their STR license, and gets revoked. So if they need to change the way that their parking pass is made because of that, then they need to determine that themselves.
I would agree with that, because I think a violation is a violation. I don't care if you're staying there during your allotted vacation time or if you're using it illegally. If there's an issue, then that homeowner and management company needs to address that. We don't need the town to police that. So, like I said, that's how I kind of look at it.
Do you think we might be able to adjust the verbiage to be, and I don't know how this works, but can we say like we suggest an expiration date, but this is not required in town ordinance? Is there a fancy legal way to say that?
Yeah, I thought the original verbiage handled it well, because it has a carve out for the HOA issue, which is where John's coming from. What it didn't address is, I'm not sure what it didn't really address that you were concerned about for Loveland passability.
Because what this is saying is that a property management company can issue any parking pass. It can be a thing that says parking permit. If that's issued by the property management company, that's okay. And I don't think that's okay. This is giving a carve out for property management and HOAs to issue whatever the heck they want without any requirements. Now, yes, sure, most HOAs and most property management companies do include the information we're looking for, but it's not setting any, there's no teeth to it, and respectfully as it's written.
And if I may, I agree, we don't want a property management company giving out to the single family homes, XYZ property management company parking pass. And so I think that language, one parking pass per allowable parking passes, in that parking plan in the application, that includes the address or unit number of the property shall be provided to all renters. And then it can end, and then no matter what, everyone has a parking pass that has a unit. We don't require HOAs or property management company to change it unless they're letting us get to the parking passes.
Is there a way to, through a best practice document or some way to encompass the mayor's concern about?
I can live.
Okay.
We're going into too much. We're engineering a solution for property management companies that isn't needed. Yeah, and I kind of wanted this to be simple from the beginning, so. Could you develop the verbiage for that, what that would look like? And so we're going to be considering the short-term rental ordinance in first reading at the council meeting. I would like to be able to make an amendment to that, to add whatever change we want to put in. Take it off the consent agenda, add whatever change we want to put in, so we can get on and not have to run a whole second ordinance process.
I think we're mostly in agreement on.
That's why I said so that's where I'm driving, trying to get to resolution. And so could I ask the town manager in the break to come up with language and your language was pretty much acceptable to
Councilmember Kerr.
Councilmember Kerr.
Hi, you decided to move on and give direction, so I backed off. But I think I think the town manager has sized up what we need to do. It's not our job to be responsible for people who outstay their welcome. We need to simply focus on having an ability to track an errant vehicle back to the responsible agent. And I think his proposal is a good one without requiring the deadline. I can't think of a better word for that. However, I did appreciate the discussion both sides. So thanks.
So, if you have that prepared for the council meeting. All right, anything else? Next item is nonprofit donations, Mr. Town Manager.
And this is because we are in budget season and we're trying to get guidance on how the board wants to proceed on the idea of budgeting for nonprofit grants. All the other towns, except, I didn't even check in the Blue River, that's my fault. But Breckenridge, Frisco, Silverthorne, and Dillon both all have annual grant programs where they award cash grants and in-kind grants. Every town has a program where they have basically small-scale grants up to $5,000. They have a set number in their budget, and that's the number of more grants than that. That's tough. They divvy up the pool among the grant applicants as the council feels worthy. A couple of the towns, Frisco and Breckenridge, both have very, very large budgets, and they have large-scale community investment grants of up to $100,000. So Breckenridge, in their small-scale grant, they budget $30,000. They spend close to $600,000 overall in grants to various entities outside that program. That's Breckenridge. Frisco has $81,500 budgeted for their small-scale grant program and $269,000 for community investment grants. Dillon had $46,000 for their small-scale grant program, and Silverthorne, I could not figure out their budget or get how they do their grants. I do know they have a program though. The question is, do we want to establish a small grant program, and do we want to put limitations on who it could go to, on what type of request it could go to? And if we do, we can work out the numbers as we go through the budget, but we really kind of need a starting point from the council.
Loosely speaking, I like the direction you're going. My only concern right off the bat is, from my professional side, in-kind grants or in-kind donations is what we do most of, right? Like free hotel stays. We're not going to be coughing out thousands of dollars in donations to any nonprofit, right? And my concern is that most of what people would probably be trying to get from us at this point is just cash. And the potential for facility space in the future is a great in-kind. I think we should also look at waived permit fees for nonprofit groups hosting events and just little things like that we can do in addition to just cash donations. But I like the idea, I like the concept, and I actually really liked Dylan's format there, basically community focused and is benefiting Dylan. So that's my loose comments on that.
Other comments? Dan?
Just a real quick question. We need to do this for budgeting purposes. I mean, if we didn't do this, just didn't do this, well, and somebody came with an in-kind request, or gosh, this makes sense to fire mitigation to give somebody $5,000, could we do that anyway? I mean, next year.
Yes, we always can, and do a supplemental budget with the publication and then notice date. So if someone came and said, I need, well, we can always do it. We can always figure out ways.
I guess the reason why I bring that up is because I had a lot of questions on this. For example, is it a first come, first serve? You know, is it, you know, how do we make those decisions? You know,
And actually, that's what I should have answered. We can do that. It's a really bad plan, because then what happens is every single meeting, you have people asking the council for a grant or a donation of some sort. And it can get ridiculous. If we establish this grant program, we would have a grant deadline date. And then staff would go over all the applications, present them all to you, but with recommendations on, here's staff's recommendation on funding levels, or do fund this one, don't fund that one. And there would just be one meeting where we deal with this all, as opposed to.
and that's my point really is that I have no idea what we should fund it at as well. So there's a lot of questions I would have. And I guess I'm curious, what are we asking for here? Is it for you to come back?
First of all, do you even feel that this is a role or something that this council should get into? We have no obligation to provide community grants to community groups or members.
Carol?
Thank you. I came into the meeting tonight thinking I was going to point out that we have other priorities. However, with the town manager's introduction of this, I had several other thoughts. First of all, I appreciate the practice of limiting the amount to be available and having a single point in which we discuss it so that we're not facing different individuals or organizations throughout the year. Whereas we need to understand that there is a limited amount of funds and we need to make decisions that we have chosen this organization or person over that. In other words, we see all the options. I think John's point is correct to have I think I see most towns have a window where they open the grant application window, and then there's a specific closing date. And the other consideration, and you would probably include this when you started creating the policy, John, but to do this on a reimbursement basis, which really makes people think twice. However, here's my other thought. This is specifically for nonprofits. Is there an opportunity here or a point in the future where we would consider economic development grants? For example, a small grant to enable a town business to invest in the front of their building, or to make it handicapped accessible, if it is not already. Is that something we would look at very differently, or could that be part of this, John?
I think, and I'm in no way opposed to that idea, but I think that's a very separate situation from this. I don't think we wrap it up with this program. I'd like to maybe deal with that next year, in next year's budget, with some business advisory committee input on it.
That makes sense. I appreciate that answer. In that case, as we think about this, can you give us a couple examples of the things we might be talking about?
Keystone Science School might ask for some money. I really couldn't give you specific examples right now because I'm not knowledgeable enough about the local nonprofits in Keystone. I'm sure there are a bunch of them located up here. They tend to proliferate in Summit County. It could be something like Team Summit could be asking for a grant to help give scholarships to lower income people who want to play for the team, things like that.
So I understand you're not dealing with any requests at this point.
No, we're not.
Okay.
And I just wanted to reemphasize Carol's comment, and I missed this. I was assuming it was a grant program. If somebody in HOA said, we'd like you to give us $5,000 for fire mitigation, we're gonna kick in $5,000. That's not a nonprofit.
Well, HOAs are nonprofits.
Okay.
And
let's put it in a home.
And in a situation like that,
Or maybe a for-profit entity.
Yeah.
That wants to do something like that. I mean, I guess why is it, back to Carol's comment, why is it just approved nonprofits?
There's no reason for it to be. I just brought up nonprofits in the title, but I think it's very important that we have, basically, I'm going to use the nonprofit as an adjective here, nonprofit goals.
Yeah.
So yes, if a private entity wanted to do fire mitigation to protect the community behind their building, that's kind of a nonprofit goal, which to me would make sense.
I would agree with that.
But in that particular case, though, I would probably first direct them to the Strong Futures Fund of the county before we would even consider it, which already has a matching program in place.
Yeah, but that's
limited.
just an example.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree that we should be offering these grant programs in the future for-profit economic development grants, or more than the nonprofit definition. My only concern is I don't want to try to drink the ocean right here, right? I think that we should start with a small step, and I view this as a small step for that, setting kind of a cadence for what that grant process looks like. And quite honestly, I am concerned with neighboring towns and the political storm that has erupted from not having a policy in place about who can use facilities and what cost or whatnot. So I would like to get ahead of that and at least have a process. I mean, for the first year, we can fund $1 into it, right? And just give nobody anything. But as long as we have a process and we start to look at that, I think that would make me feel better.
I would not want to do all the work required and not without any money.
I would just like to say, I think this is a wonderful thing and something our town should strive for. I just question the timing. Given so much that we have to do, being a new town, I don't really feel that we can be faulted for not implementing it right at this time. I think it's not something for next year's budget, but I think it's a very strong consideration candidate given the following year's budget.
I concur.
Carol?
So, again, I thought I was going to recommend that we wait another year. But I like John's point about coming up with a process. I think my concern, and if I'm listening carefully to my fellow council members, the concern is the amount of money we're talking about. If we create a very low threshold and almost use it as this is our soft opening, shall we say, for the grant program, it would be easier for us to explain that to fellow town members as to why that became a priority for us.
And if I may weigh into, if you're concerned about capacity, establishing the program will actually lessen the burden. Because if someone comes in out of season and asks for money, I can just say no, rather than I'll put it in front of the council and let the council decide if they want to give me this money.
I do agree with that, and I think, John, that was your strongest talking point for this, so thank you.
Sorry, last comment, promise. I was kind of with Carol going into this and you saying, why are we doing this right now? I do think it's the right thing to do. certainly in a mature town. So coming into this, I say, no, not right now. But if we can do this and we can come up with a reasonable, I mean, we're nervous about our finances, it's our first year. So we really can't go, big this year at all. But if we can have a reasonable policy and put in, a starter fund, I'd be fine, I'd say okay.
I would agree with that as well.
What, give me a better, I've only heard one number thrown out there, and that is unworkable.
The $1?
Yeah.
$2.
But basically, though, you got two pieces. One's the policy, and then the second question is funding the policy. Funding the policy is part of the budget, not part of the policy.
Correct.
So you could put the policy in place for it, and then we can address how much we're going to put into that policy when we see it.
Okay.
Is that acceptable?
I do have a question, and this might be too much of a minutia right now, but for the budget, and I'm just throwing out a random number here. Let's say it's a $10,000 budget, right? And in-kind donations end up accounting for 5,000 of that. Would we still have 10,000 total?
I think we pulled the in-kind out. Well, we have to create a policy on using this property.
So
This would be, I'm looking at cash.
I guess what I was getting at with that question is that should be considered, right? Is in-kind value considered against that?
I don't think it should be.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
That's what if you handle it in the budget process, then you are talking dollars.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that okay with everyone? So we just gave the town manager more work to do.
That's okay, you're saving me working
He
long
told us
run.
save us
You're
work.
saving me working in the long run.
All right. Next item is discussion of housing, and I'll turn it over to the town manager.
Okay, we've had a lot of housing blow up over the last week, a lot of interest. Oh, all right, is everything okay?
The incident resolved.
Okay, so, I've been putting off developing a housing program until we got our needs assessment. But I know several council members want to get the ball rolling. We have money in the bank. We're continuing to get money in the bank. I guess the real question is what do you want to see and when do you want to see it, and should we hire a staff member to put it together?
John?
I'm just going to make a very introductory level comment. I think that there was a lot of, while not technically or formulaically flaws, I think that there's a lot of us going like, ooh, that could not account for everything in the housing study. And that's my concern, is that I think that if we go strictly by what's done there, a lot of people have a lot of historical knowledge about this town and experiences that could just get bulldozed by an official number that was pulled on the census thing. And so I guess that's just my one kind of comment, is I'm wary about the official studies.
So let me summarize what that means to a staff member. I want a housing program that, and this is not necessarily a wrong way to build a housing program, that's a shotgun. We're going to spread it over the face of housing solutions.
If that's one way to put it, then sure, but I guess I'm really having trouble with, checking the box for a housing study and using data that I personally view as flawed. So I think that, I'm not saying shotgun, I'm saying maybe like a buckshot, like strategic shotgun placement there. but it's just, I don't like the checkbox
It's,
approach.
I don't view it as, that housing assessment is a checkbox. That's a document that we can use with advice. It's not a directionary document.
And that's what I really, I'm
It
trying to
gives
get at.
us- It gets us information that we can then use and use whatever information we see in that study that we consider valuable to us to form the housing program.
I just don't want that document to be the source of truth for Keystone.
You are the source of truth for Keystone. This council says what the truth is for Keystone at all times. All the documents we have, all the committees we have are simply there to give you information so you can distill it and say,
Okay, my comments doesn't, so.
Can I ask, John, what are you asking for today?
well, I'm asking, do we want to ramp up a housing program right now? And to what do we want it directed at? There are a few solutions that have been proven to work. Any community that is land banked, actually no community hasn't land banked with an affordable housing program. Any community that's land banked continues to do so. All the communities that have established down payment assistance programs continue to do so. And it took a while to roll out, but the purchase of deed restrictions, market housing, once the towns rolled it out, I haven't seen a town pull that back either. I think those are three things we could start to put together in a plan right now. It's going to take a lot of thought and effort because you need some really clear policies that you can apply across the thing. I don't see how it would do any good for the town to give someone who has a $3 million house a $5 million or a $500,000 buy down to deconstruct that house. That house will never be affordable. So we have to have clear limits on where these programs would apply. But we can go forward and start working on things like that. It's going to take a lot of work, and we have a lot of other work. So the other question I want to know from you is, how do you feel about adding a staff member who part of their salary could be paid from housing, and they could be our housing coordinator, and maybe housing and open space. Half the money can come out of housing, half the money out of the general fund.
I mean, I've been one of the most vocal proponents of establishing a housing program. I think we've had active interest from our community. I think we have very restricted, naturally existing affordable housing in the Keystone community, and because of how our community is evolving rapidly, if we don't get on this, we're going to miss a valuable opportunity to preserve what we do have. And so I'm a huge proponent of doing something now rather than waiting until later. I don't think that this can wait.
My comment is more on the process. This is a very important, strategic, but complicated area. And there's a lot of issues about who are we trying to help, and why are we trying to help, and then on top of that, and after you decide that, then the programs. So to me, it's what I heard is, well, let's just try one or two of these things because people, and I need the big picture first, and I need to understand what we're trying to fix. Just because a good program worked real well at another community, I don't want to just do that one because we know it works well. Is that really strategic for us? And that's, so I'm really wrestling with what that next step. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do this, and housing is a big thing, but I need to have that first step.
Aaron.
I see your point, Dan, that we need to be thoughtful and intentional and choose the best tools. But here's the problem. We're over a year into this, and I don't know, we're gonna be 2, 3 years before we take any meaningful action and finally choose the right tool. And over that time period, in fact, over a year since we've been in town, we've slowly been degrading the natural existing housing programs that we had. One that we either lost through the county or through the ongoing evolution of perverse incentives for people to take housing offline or redevelop into unaffordable housing. So the thing is, like, we can sit around and go like, well, we should have a really good study, a really good tool, and eventually one day we'll do the right thing, but it'll be too late. So what I would recommend we do is try to do some targeted stopgaps, stop the flooding before the ship sinks, before we figure out what the best repair for the ship is. Can't we do that?
I guess I'm not even clear about all flooding. So that's my challenge.
Okay, valid point. Let me illustrate it. We have already had before us request on this council to approve exceptions in areas that were erstwhile affordable to create more unaffordable housing that will be targeted towards short-term rentals. We're continuing to run headlong with resort overlays as if River Run was the same thing as Level Pass Village around their STRs and the development that goes around that. And in the meantime, there were programs from the county to support, from county open space housing, some kind of housing that supported some of that housing being directed towards affordability. So what I'm trying to say is there is a trend, and we're taking a march away from existing working systems as much as they work, right? I mean, no one's going to say it's perfect. And it's very hard for me to go like, well, okay, because we want it right and good and understood and the right tools applied, it's fine for things to go laissez-faire in the meantime.
Aaron, if I might, and please correct me if I'm wrong, by us doing nothing, we've effectively done something, which is remove the programs that existed here before.
We're allowing a continual process of erosion of availability of affordable housing and not restoring potential programs that could be stopgap measures. They might not be the right tools. They might not. Or we just want to go if that's what we decide.
Which programs? And which programs have we removed? And which programs do you want?
I don't know that we have removed anything. But there were incentives for renting to locals.
That's no longer exists.
Right.
In the county.
Correct. But that's a tool we could look at. We could look at it with limited application. We can look at whether we want to continue to allow development codes to continue the way the county had them, rather than slowing it down until we pick out the right tools. Because we have an option. We can pick the right tools and let things go as they are until that point, or we can take a more conservative approach and then choose the right tools, and that might open things up downstream.
Carol.
I hear a lot of passion, and I appreciate that. I think a lot of us have been impatient about moving forward on a number of issues, and we have had staff who try to calm us down and say, well, we need to take things in order. I think the point I would make about that is, I believe the housing assessment will be completed in the next 2, maybe 3 months, finalized. And like my colleague Dan, I think before we say the data is flawed, which we may indeed decide, but we have to actually see that data before we can get there. So while the passion and the sense of some sense of things going wrong very quickly is clear, my question is, what is happening in the next 3 months that we must ward off? I'm trying to get a better sense of your concerns, your timeliness concerns.
Steve?
I agree that, there's a lot of nuances to the housing concept. For me, I kind of see the housing as a focus of employee housing and senior housing, which are some very important needs up here. When I look at affordable housing, I view it as someone trying to take on the free market system. We don't have developers knocking on town's doors saying, I want to build affordable housing up here. They want to build free market housing. So I think affordable housing is a whole different beast in itself. So I think as we address housing, I think we need to look at what are some meaningful impacts and kind of navigate our way down that path.
Aaron?
I agree, there's practicality there. Affordable housing is one of the worst terms that you can possibly use for a lot of what's being done. Workforce housing is probably more accurate for most of what we're talking about. But we do have like workforce neighborhoods, some of them are de-restricted, some of them aren't. And I think there's an opportunity to do some work to prevent the ones that are not de-restricted from continuing to turn into non-local, non-workforce, overdeveloped short-term rental neighborhoods. Especially since this place has so few so few areas that might fit in that categorization. We just don't have a lot of single-family home neighborhoods here anyway. Mostly condos, they're built for short-term rentals. That is why they were built. They were built at that time, and they work really well for that. I don't think anyone's talking about those.
I think we're mixing two things. We're mixing the zoning issue, which we have a comp plan that's going to be completed in the October time period. That's going to have I believe, some thoughts on that subject to look at. There's a second issue, which is county workforce housing programs that were in place when we incorporated and what those are. I would be hesitant to go forward and preempt the comp plan and the planning zone, planning commission's look at the zoning issue until we get that comp plan done. I could see us addressing the second piece, which is taking a look at what was in place with the county and putting as a stopgap something in place to fill that gap until we get into the other issue. I think this fall we're going to be able to start addressing the whole zoning issues when that comp plan comes out. So we're talking a couple months as we're going. Yeah.
So one thing that I keep thinking about, Keystone has a lot of very smart people and a lot of knowledge here, but I don't think we're going to reinvent the wheel too drastically here. And for me, there's only so many possible options for what we can do with our resource-being land-constrained community. And I guess what I'd like to see to Carol and Dan's point, like what's gonna, well, more Carol's point for 3 months, what can we do in 3 months or what? Like, I think we can at least start looking at this. Yeah. We can start, again, there's only a few options that we can realistically go down here. Can we start looking at this and see the feasibility? Because I'd hate for us to come back in 3 months and be like, okay, let's start at square one here. Let's start looking at this in 3 months. I want to start looking at this a year ago, but ideally right now.
I'm going to ask the town manager a question. What staff's bandwidth to be able to start addressing this now?
I would really, having actually come up with several unique housing solutions myself, they're not all out there. Actually, I sat in the room with the Vail person when they first came up with the buy-down idea. That was a bunch of us housing people discussing. We came up with the emergency assistant housing fund in Winter Park, which was a new thing for someone who has an injury, illness, issues like that. It's not a dead field. There are certainly things that have been proven not to work. And there's no reason for us to try plans that we can see why they failed. We don't have a lot of bandwidth. We don't have a lot of bandwidth. We do have a lot of housing. Relatively. Millions, over $1 million a year coming into the town is a nice fund that most towns do not have the luxury of having outside their general fund. They get housing, most communities don't have a housing tax. We're very lucky to have that. It's a big way towards the solution. We don't have a lot of bandwidth to put the program together with the staff we currently have. Because our community development department is dealing with regular community development plans that come in every single day. Plus, we are going to have some very large zoning and land use discussions and issues as soon as the comp plan is done and we can legally justify dealing with things like that. That's our problem, to tell the truth. It's, you know, we could put together 1 or 2 quick programs, but it's going to be at the cost of pushing out something else back, which is not necessarily a bad idea. I'm just letting you know that, but staff is maxed out. And
Can I ask a question? Really, I don't know who would answer this. I heard tonight that we have, there were county programs that people relied on, I think, here, that, because we're a town, we killed it.
well, there is one for sure I know about, and that's Housing Helps. That's the down payment assistance program. So that's the one we killed.
And was that being utilized?
Yes, people utilize Housing Helps. I would like to get Housing Helps, a down payment assistance program. It's a wonderful thing because it actually, it's really a low, ultra low loan. So it doesn't necessarily deplete, it does deplete our immediate funds, but doesn't deplete our planning of how to spend funds doing this thing.
So, Councilman Aaron, is that kind of what you're most, I mean, I didn't know that we had killed something like that, and I don't know if it's been disparaging our citizenry, and I just don't know. So are there other programs like that that really kind of kill people in town and we hurt ourselves?
Well, I think that's a really good one to illustrate, and I would agree wholeheartedly with Manager Club. This is one of the best ways that you can use your housing dollars. One of the best ways. I think the manager would disagree with me on another plan that we didn't just intend to by becoming a town, but there was a program in place basically to get owners to agree to take a market unit and rent it as deed restricted with a stipend for offset. And I think that's something that is beneficial in the short term while you think about what the general plan is going to be. And I know that it is regarded at, I'll let the manager say why it is not. But here's what I do see is I see neighbors coming and saying like, well, I had been renting to locals, or I have to leave my house that I've lived in for 25 years and I want to rent it to locals, but I have to like meet X amount of, you know, bills and costs and mortgages. And I can do that easily by short term if I don't want to do that. But I can't do it by just long term. So they're looking for a program like that, and that can be used in targeted application to help preserve some areas from trending. areas that weren't designed for short-term rentals, we're trying to get short-term rentals.
There's a town staff member that left here, had trouble meeting his mortgage because he couldn't find somebody long-term rental and or at a market rate.
Who?
There's a town staff member that was talking to me about renting their unit when they left. And they said, no, it's in another area.
Oh, different.
But it is showing a trend, right? And it's showing a trend that Aaron is hitting a nail on the head. And it's more than just one example.
Well, he didn't leave here because he couldn't have housing. He left here because his wife had to move for her job.
Understood, but when he tried to rent it out, right, he
Yeah.
would have had to be at an unreasonably high rate to actually cover everything.
Yeah.
And that's happens time and time again.
I think everyone agrees that this is an important topic, and it sounds like the recommendation is to hire a person for this position. I think going back to Dan's comment and concern, would there be like a job description that would help us determine what this person would be doing or responsibilities, or to help guide us as to?
Pretty darn easy, put together and run a housing program.
So it would give us some initial information as to, okay, we start taking some steps moving forward, but we kind of know where we're headed with this.
And I want to respond, Councilmember Carmen, yes, no, I don't like the rental program. It's been a colossal failure in all the municipalities that have done it. But that being said,
Can you say why it failed?
Abuse. The fact is, it just pushed off the problem for a year, and you might have someone who's counting on that place existing, and their owner pulled it out of the program anyways because any number of reasons. Sold the property, wanted a short-term rental it, then you have someone trying to find a place the next year after they felt they had it. It creates more housing insecurity in a way, but it's not a horrible situation as a immediate stopgap measure, as long as we understand and everyone going into it understands this is not part of the solution. This is holding off the problem while we find the solutions, which are out there.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think, that makes a lot of sense, and I think you identified, like, it's not a perfect program, and there's holes in it, and you can potentially address some of it by doing it differently. Like you said, like, instantly someone could go in it for a year and decide they wanted out of it, but you could make a program where you make the terms X many years, so you're not cycling people in and out just so they got it.
Yeah. And then, but my other point is I have the knowledge, I don't have the bandwidth.
Do we have the money to hire someone?
Yes.
And I would propose that we hire somebody. This is painful. This seems like a political quagmire where certain priorities get prioritized and move forward and other ones don't. We fought very hard to become members of the Summit County Housing Authority, and we need to follow through with our commitment to rising above subpar seasonal housing and providing real solutions in this community.
Real affordable solutions.
Mike, I think we all agree with that.
Let's do it.
So,
What hires?
Yes, let's start making progress on a real program that impacts people who are real residents and contributors to this community, and really stand up to the quality that we're hoping to provide at the resort level. If we don't have residents who work and live in this community, we're not going to have a first-class resort. We're just not. It's a pyramid, and if the foundation crumbles, the rest of it crumbles.
So I've heard a lot of people talk about hiring. Is there anyone against that?
I think we'd have to have, I'd like to see a proposal from the town manager for what that would look like, and also what the, obviously be some sort of split in there for some of the department, because you probably wouldn't have a full-time person working, and probably a split between the community development or something.
We have to hire It would have to be a full-time person
Right.
because the skill level is too high to
Yes.
get.
Excuse me.
With-
I'm the budget thing, because it's really two pots of money that are in that.
Excuse me. Hello?
Go ahead, Carol.
I, while we may decide to hire someone, I would have really appreciated if we could get some expert, if not from the county, because there seems to be some hesitance about taking their recommendations, maybe from someone from the state who can outline for us on a formal basis the different kinds of programs that are available, that are possible, and what the pros and cons are. Because I think we're all relying on not even institutional, but ad hoc knowledge from one person or another, or something we've seen in the newspaper. And there's probably a more systematic way we can go about making ourselves smart on what our options are.
I was a housing professional, so that's what I did.
Well,
I put together.
I specifically said that because you said you didn't have the bandwidth. And so if we get some third party person in here who just give us a 45-minute tutorial on what are the options, that would be very helpful.
Well, it's not a 45-minute tutorial. I mean, we're talking about setting up.
Okay,
It's
2
a
hours.
full-time, non-stop program. It's
I'm
constantly
talking about
evolving,
the fact that
constantly changing.
each of our points here has been made based on, I know someone who, I read about someone who. There has to be someone who can give us a objective review of all the housing assistance options that exist.
Dan?
And kind of going back to my earlier comment, it's mine, we're being asked to make some decisions, and I just want to make sure I'm making good ones. And that, what Carol was saying is kind of what I was saying, is that I'd like a little bit more information. And that expert, maybe that's part of the process of when we hire somebody, we get somebody that's an expert already as a one-man contractor, and then we hire them. But I would like just more knowledge before I just decide. I do think we will want to hire somebody. I really.
I mean, I'm an expert, and I'm saying if we want a program, we need to hire someone to run it. That's my expert opinion as a housing professional.
So I think that Carol's point is valid in the sense that, there's some uncertainty about what the future needs to be, right? I think that there are several of us that want to see action immediately. But I do also get the point that we don't want to just be running down the line tunnel and potentially walk away. I really don't want to wait until we post a job rec, hire somebody, get them settled in, and then wait for a presentation on all the possible options, right? And then take action, because again, we're back down to 4 months down the road, now we're at step one. So I like, personally where I'm at is I'd like to see us get on the same page with whatever information we need, whether that's SCHA or somebody giving us a quick and dirty presentation on these are the options, and then we can make initial decisions on that, and then we can go into more of a plan for the 5-10 year approach with a professional that we would like to hire.
I would suggest that we do have to get you an extra year. God willing, I trust you. In our next session, or as soon as we can, a work session, we should have a considerable amount of time where we discuss this. And then at the same time, look at hiring.
I can tell you, we can bring in SCHA, we can bring in a state person, we can bring in an outside housing consultant, and they're going to tell you the best options for you going forward are land banking, buy down need restrictions, and housing help type programs. And that's what we'll hear. And we can take another meeting to hear that. The issue with those three things is they're not just those words. They are massive policy and enforcement procedures that have to back up those programs. And that's not something that SCHA will come in and tell us what to do. That's not something the state will come in and tell us what to do. That's someone we need to hire to put together.
If I may, I think it is appropriate for us to get very educated by somebody who's not part of us, who can come in and has no, they're not going to have any, what's the word? Something in the game. And then we will know why we're hiring somebody. We'll have very specific objectives. I accept your expertise that those are probably the three things we will look at, but to help us figure out which of those three things or all of them, we should educate ourselves, not just rely on your experience.
I understand, however, what you're asking for is, this is not a 2-hour discussion. What you're asking for is us to hire another consultant for $100,000 to lay out the terms of the program, which will be get someone on staff so you can develop the policies to run these programs.
Would anyone be opposed to having staff or direction for staff start to develop a position description? And before we hit send and before we hit post, at least start that process. And then I don't think we need to go the $100,000 consultant, but a 45-minute presentation from SCHA or something that is a compromise with that.
She did it 2 months ago. She literally came in and gave a.
Didn't tell me about how land bank works.
Well, in fact, I asked her if she would be creating something like that, like I just described, a pros and cons of each of these types. And she said, that's a good idea. I think I'll look at that. So no, we didn't get that.
That's all right.
But it's also limited. We need to focus on Keystone. We know an outside, no skin in the game person is not the person we want putting our housing program together. We want someone who is intimately aware of Keystone, has the ability to dive into the Keystone numbers, the Keystone solutions, the Keystone specific problems we have. I think bringing in an outside person to basically say everything that was in the email we got this week is a waste of time and resources.
I'll tell you what my confusion is. I agree with a person coming that's knowledgeable, that can run this program, 1, 2, 3, and understand all that kind of stuff. Because I don't understand the policy requirement, too good for that. What we need, though, I think, from the council is just, we heard that we want to take some quick action. Well, I'd like to kind of think, what are the 3 or 4, and then the pros and cons of those 3 or 4 that we should take now, before this person comes in.
Well, no quick action can happen without a person coming in.
And that person would make those recommendations.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Okay, well, I was hearing that that's 3 months, 4 months out.
It's better than where we are now, waiting for a flawed report on a check-the-box housing report that is compelled by the state, that nobody really seems to have a sincere intention of applying Keystone.
Well, as long as we're not asking for any programs to start right away.
We can't, because they require a lot of real stringent policies and rules, and someone who can oversee those stringent policies and rules.
Okay. And that's not, because what I was hearing earlier is that we dropped the ball because there were county programs out there that we should have probably picked up. And if that's not the case, fine, I'm fine with this
I
idea.
don't think that's what he's saying, that we have dropped the ball. The reality is the county had certain housing programs in place that were no longer, that are not accessible to us, and we don't have a stopgap in place to fill those programs, and we haven't done anything to hire somebody to assess what the needs are of Keystone and what programs we can feasibly put in place sooner rather than later. And I'm so tired. There are certain things that we're putting in place prior to a master plan, but other things are like, oh, well, we have to wait for the master plan to come in to be able to move on this. Loveland Pass Village is being Pac-Manned up. We already approved a variance to allow Loveland Pass Village to be overbuilt on one piece of property. It's becoming a commercial zone of short-term rental homes. And there are locals who have owned businesses in this community who are looking to leave, who desperately want to have these deed restricted homes available for long-term rentals for future residents in this community who actually contribute. And if we don't do that now, those houses are going to sell to short-term rental people who have no investment in this community other than they want a short-term rental for their own gratification and financial benefit, rather than preserving that community for the naturally existing affordable housing that it is and has been historically. That is undeniable to anybody who has lived in this community. And we know certain things that no master plan can tell us. We all knew it going into incorporation. And one of those things is that Loveland Pass villages are naturally existing affordable housing, and we have to start putting programs in place sooner rather than later than waiting for some guy who's sterilely applying state standards and has no idea that Loveland Pass Village is different than Norfolk River Estates or the Alders. We know these things to be true as a town council. That's why we're elected.
Okay, well, back to the question really, is that if we can wait there, I think is the council an agreement that, you know, let's go hire somebody, and we can, there's nothing that is going to fall through the cracks until that person comes up with they've done their analysis, they've learned their town, they've got proposals, and they've been to develop a policy and they're going to present to us. Because that's a number of months off, but that's what I think we're coming to an agreement on. Is that correct?
So I think, yes, I think that and I agree with what Valerie just said, by the way. What I think is the concern is that we're gonna wait 3 or 4 months until this plan is released and then start the process. We need to start the process, well, in my opinion, we need to start the process now. We're not gonna tomorrow start doing deed restrictions, buy-downs, but we need to at least start the process, start the conversation, get the people in place, get the information that's needed, and not wait 4 months to then start that process from square one. We need to be at square one now.
What is the process? I'm trying to understand.
And that's what a housing professional calls.
And I think the reasons we should start that now is because clearly we should have started that 4 to 6 months ago. That way, that person could already be on board and understanding the community and working out various alternatives that can then conform with what we learn and want to deploy and bring before the council. We're behind the 8 ball, now we can play starting now. We can start the process now.
And I think, I'm still confused with what the process is. The process is we're going to go hire a professional.
And that person will educate you monthly, you know. That's where the education on housing will come from. And that's my recommendation.
And agree with all that. I guess I was hearing all sorts of things about we need to put our money where our mouth is right now, which was more than just the hiring somebody.
Again, I think this is a very emotional conversation and a very emotional issue for several of us, and I think a lot of our community members. So I think that those emotions might come off as like we haven't done enough, we haven't done enough, we haven't done enough. But really, we just need to start at least down the road to do something. Is I think what it could be seen as.
I think several of us would support. I think several of us would support taking some action right now. There was some practical, concrete action before us that was implementable. I think we're frustrated that there is not because we haven't been working on it. And so you're hearing those frustrations. We could, but we can't, so let's do something that gets us there sooner. Stop waiting to initiate.
But I'm not going to speak for the mayor, but I think there's good consensus that the proposal, to go back to the simple one, is that we need some help. And I thought the idea, if you, John, you could tell me, you know, what's the characteristics of that person, what do you expect from that person, and then let's go find that person. Is that the consensus? I don't know.
I think that's,
Well, we didn't even know we were getting housing money, to tell the truth. It took us forever to get
Yeah, true.
the housing authority to do what they needed to do.
yeah, and I think the key is we should have put with the housing funding coming in this last year's budget, we should have put a split person in there, or at least a part-time person in there, or it hadn't been split to pick up that function. All right, so you have your direction.
Yep, I think I can get through the next one in 2 minutes.
Wanna make a bet?
Yeah. We've all seen the fire impact fees. What I want to do is bring up a resolution to the town council requesting that the ballot language, or it's not even a ballot, it's just a proposed fee increase, exempt government entities and nonprofit housing from fire impact fees.
Okay, all right. You're successful. Yeah, there was, shall we try the next item is management council issues. There was one issue that was raised, and it was the discussion of digital items associated with open meetings. And I'd like to get that addressed briefly. I don't think it's appropriate for that to go to, well, it could to be a executive session type item.
I respectfully think this is going to be a conversation that we should have with only 20 minutes left.
All right, we'll defer it to, that's easy. I was just trying to be responsive to your,
No, understood.
with that, there's no objection. The work session is adjourned.
That's about public land discussion.
What?
Public land discussion?
That's council meeting.
Okay.
It's on the